Session is 4 must-have moments in every successful sales demonstration. We're going to be with Chris White, the founder of DemoDoctor.com. A couple of notes here. DemoFest is hosted by Consensus, and we help pre-sales teams to scale with intelligent demo automation. We are going to be recording this session, and we'll be posting a link. So we've created a LinkedIn group called Scaling Pre-Sales and Sales Engineering. I will be posting a link to join that LinkedIn group in the chat today, and you can get a copy of this session as well as our other sessions in the next couple of weeks. Throughout this presentation, feel free to ask questions. Just do so through the Q&A section you'll see through the Zoom chat. Post those there, and then we'll have a couple of minutes at the end where Chris will be answering questions. Without further ado, I'll pass the time over to Chris.
Great, thanks so much, Miles. Really appreciate it. And let me just say a hearty good morning, good afternoon, or even good evening to those of you who have joined. I know many of you have certainly other options that, for how to spend the next hour. So really appreciate you spending some time with me. I'm actually looking at the attendees. We've got over 300 folks, it looks like, have joined. I suspect some of you may have heard me speak before, and maybe for some of you, this is first time. So really appreciate it. I do want to go ahead and get started with a poll. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Oh, Miles, it looks like you will be sharing. So I think you need to stop sharing, and I'll go ahead and start. There we go. So if any of you, as I said, have heard me speak, you might be familiar. I like using Mentimeter to take polls. So if you can open up a browser and go to menti.com and type in the code 440205. Go ahead and answer the first question, which is what best describes your role? And we should see some answers popping up here. I don't know how many responses Mentimeter can handle. So I don't know if we'll break Mentimeter in the process or not. Okay, so that's great. So while that's coming up, let me just take a minute to introduce myself. I know many of you know me. In fact, I've got a copy here. Many of you know me as the guy who wrote the 6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineers. And I've had a number of people ask me, Chris, you're not talking about the 6 habits? So the answer is no, I'm not actually going to talk about the 6 habits. But I will say that what we're going to talk about today, it lives within what I call habit number 5, which is to perform. And these are the skills that we bring to the table when we're in front of a customer. At some point, the spotlight's on us and it's our time to shine. It's our moment to shine. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today. Okay, it looks like we've got some good numbers. So the vast majority of people on our sales engineers, that's super. I've actually got another questionnaire if we can get to it. I'm interested, what best describes your industry? Are you in sales or MarTech? Are you FinTech? Are you high-tech, telecom? This just helps me understand. And I think it's a very interesting question because sales engineers in high-tech roles, as the combination would indicate, tend to be high-tech individuals. And then, folks, sales engineers in like a MarTech or a sales tech, a lot of times they may come from, they may have been a super user or something like that. So that really changes things. So, all right, it looks like we have a lot of people from industry specific, some high-tech. That's great. And I do have one more question. I'm really interested. How long have you been in a sales role? And by the way, hopefully this is interesting to those of you as well. I just think it's interesting to sort of get an understanding and an insight into, who's on the call, and who's dialing in. So it looks like we've got some really senior folks, some folks that have been in the role for over 15 years. For those of you, you could probably you could certainly give my talk for me. Really appreciate you dialing in. It looks like we've got the second biggest group is those who have been in the role for about 1 to 5 years. And then we've got a smattering of others. So that's fantastic, guys. So thanks so much. Let's go ahead and get into the content now. So the title is the 4 must-have moments in every successful sales demonstration. Well, let's start by answering a very important question. What do we mean by demo? Well, the definition I'm going to use for today is any scenario in which you're presenting to or facilitating a conversation with a customer or a prospect. And what might that be? Well, of course, a technical presentation or demonstration. But it might be a workshop or a whiteboard conversation. And of course, in today's world, more than likely, it's an online presentation and demonstration. This, as we all know, this is the world that we're living in. And incidentally, I did want to just take a minute before I started. I just wanted to say to everybody out there, I hope you're still doing okay in the pandemic. These are challenging times for all of us. They're challenging times for our customers. And I do think it's important for us to be sensitive to the environment whenever we get into a sales conversation or engagement. Some people, I think, are very comfortable talking about the situation. Some people less so. So I think this is just an important it's an important part of even our, of course, our work lives. So when I say demo, I'm talking about a pretty broad conversation. What do we mean when we say success? And how do we define success? I actually think it depends. I think it depends on the context of the meeting. I think it depends on the context of the account, the opportunity. I think it depends on the context of your typical sales cycle. If you have a very complex platform and very long sales cycles, you might have to have numerous mini wins and successes along the journey to closing the deal, right? Now, I believe that our role as sales engineers is to get the technical win. I believe that's what defines success for us. But in some cases, it may be something much smaller. It may be satisfying a specific requirement or uncovering some new requirements. It may be to spark a new idea. Maybe we're meeting with an existing customer and we're trying to spark a new idea to get them to think broadly or think about maybe a new offering. Maybe it's to present to a new management team or to a new set of stakeholders, right? Maybe we've been working and we have a legacy customer, if you will, but they've had a change of management, right? So success comes in different sizes and shapes. I think it's very important to consider going into any one of these demos or meetings, what does success actually look like? And anybody who's ever heard me speak before knows that I believe sales is a team sport. And as such, I believe sales demonstrations are team events. Now, without a doubt, those of us who are the sales engineers, we're going to be the ones who are typically standing in front of the customer, giving the demonstration, right? Sort of clicking through the solution, if you will, right? But it's a team sport. One of my favorite sayings, one of the things I say to the account execs that I work with is I coach and my friends have coached soccer, right? And we teach kids, you got to move without the ball, right? Only one person can have the ball at one time, but that doesn't mean you're not in the game. It's the same thing with a sales demonstration, right? Whether you're actually the person talking or not, you still have to be in the game. So going into any demo or sales meeting, we need to be aligned. Our SEs and our AEs, we need to be aligned on the goals and the approach. By the way, in our new world, right, this happens remote. We can't have, in most cases, a collaborative meeting even over a cup of coffee. So we need to work that much harder in this remote environment. At the end of the day, we always need to have a plan. So what are the 4 moments that make up a successful sales demonstration? Well, I believe a sales demo is a journey. And when we step into a meeting or open up an online meeting, we have a plan and we have an agenda and we have a destination. And somehow we need to get from where we are to that destination. The question is how. And that's what we're here to talk about today. As I say, I believe there's 4 moments that every successful sales demonstration needs to have. And in fact, I believe there are some smaller steps and smaller stops along the way. Now, the way I'd like to position each one of these must-have moments is to talk about the challenges that we face in getting there. So let's talk about the first challenge. It's what I refer to as simply the group dynamics. Every time you walk into a room or start a meeting, more than likely you're going to have a group of people. You're going to have, typically the buying committee, the buying teams are typically 5, 8, 10, maybe even 12 people, maybe more. They're going to have competing objectives, competing agendas. They have different roles and responsibilities. They have different perspectives, different interests. And if there's anything I've learned in the 30 plus career I've had, every time I walk into a meeting, I discovered a long time ago that everybody's thinking the exact same thing. I posted this on LinkedIn the other day. It's all about me. So our challenge is to address all these individuals who on some level are thinking it's all about me. I need my requirements, my concerns, my issues satisfied. And somehow we need to challenge that. Or I'm sorry, we need to get our hands around that, right? And we need to take on that challenge. This leads us to our first important must-have moment. We need to get consensus in the room before we start. Now, I know our hosts are loving me right now for the first must-have moment. And this is not me being a kiss-up. This is sincerely the term that I use. So I just threw you guys a big bone, but it's sincerely the right thing. We need consensus before we start. What do I mean by that? The reason we're here is what we've discussed up until this point is your primary objective is what I plan to present is what you're about to see is what we're trying to do is we're trying to get everybody on the same page. I want general agreement. We want general agreement in the room that, you know, we're assembled here to accomplish this goal. We've talked about these things. This is what we understand. And this is what we're going to demonstrate for you today, right? Why do we want to do this up front? Because if there's some key person with an expectation that's way out of left field, you know, off the reservation, we want to find that out up front before we get into the demo. And let's deal with it up front. If it's something that we're not prepared to talk about, we better address that right now and set the expectations up front. So what are the keys to building consensus? Well, first, folks, I don't know about you, but I always love to make sure I understand the words that I use. And to me, there's just so much power in words. So I looked at one of these words up and wanted to make sure I understand the definition. And the definition that I found for consensus is just a general agreement, a generally accepted opinion. That's exactly what we want to get before we launch into our demo. So how do we do this? First of all, we got to know the players. Who's in the room? You're more than likely going to have some decision makers. You might have some technical principals. You might have some technicians or architects. You might have some people who are users. You might have what I call some uninvited guests, some folks who, you know, the client said, hey, come join us. The folks from Consensus are here to give a demonstration, right? We want to know who those people are, and that helps us understand what is their perspective. What might their agenda be, right? Are they influential or not? Are they fans of ours or not? And then we just want to get agreement in the room. This is what we're here to talk about today. These are the key objectives. These are the key requirements. This is what we're trying to accomplish, and this is what we're going to demonstrate today. Are we all on the same page here? Has anything changed since the last time we talked, right? And once we get agreement in the room, we get consensus, now we have the, you know, sort of the comfort and the freedom and the confidence to move into our demo. So let's revisit our journey. Moment number one, consensus. Miles, I'm going to pause just every once and again to see if there are any questions, because I'm not going to be able to look at questions and keep my flow. Are there any, and it's reasonably early, so I'm not necessarily thinking there might be, are there any key comments or questions that you feel are worth noting at this point? And Miles, you're on mute.
Let's keep going.
You go. Okay, great.
Yeah, let's keep going right now.
So, okay, great. All right, so the second challenge, time and attention. What do I mean by time and attention? Let's face it, folks, people have a short attention span. There's numerous distractions, especially now that we're all working from home and we've got, you know, Facebook and LinkedIn and email and IM and all that, you know, all those distractions. Let's be honest. People have reasonably low expectations in many cases for demos. A lot of people have sat through a lot of demos that frankly were boring, and they oftentimes show up somewhat reluctantly. And everybody's got time limitations. And here's the biggest challenge we have even today, particularly in the pandemic. Zoom fatigue, and I'm not picking on Zoom. Online meeting fatigue. We are all sitting through online meeting after online meeting after online meeting. It's really hard to capture people's attention. By the way, I know you're sitting at your desk, you know, or your kitchen table somewhere at home, listening to me on a Zoom meeting. So I appreciate you being here, right? So how do we address this? How do we address the fact that we are fighting for attention and we're struggling to get time? The key moment, the must-have moment, is climactic moments. It's what we like to refer to as the money shot. We need to grab their attention. We need to challenge the status quo. we need to activate what's called the RAS. I don't know if you're familiar with the term. The RAS, I think it's called the reticular activating system. It's a part of the brain that wakes people up, that alerts people, right, to something fearful or exciting. That's why I tend to be, I tend to speak with a lot of energy and animation because I'm trying to get people engaged, right? That's the second key must-have moment in any demo. Now, how do we get there? What are the keys to delivering those climactic moments? Well, again, let's start with a definition. It's a moment in a story which is very exciting, and an exciting event has occurred. First of all, let me emphasize the word story. When we're presenting our solution, when we're giving a demonstration, we should do so. We need to do so in the context of a story. And I've talked a lot about storytelling. That's not part of this seminar. I did a seminar or webinar a couple weeks ago about that. But what are some of the keys to capturing our audience's attention? The first is begin with the end. I know many of you are familiar with Peter Cohen. He's an author in the space. He wrote The Great Demo. He's been in the space for 15 plus years, and his book is based on this notion of begin with the end. We need to make our most impressive, most significant view right out of the box. Another author in the space and a friend of mine, Brian Geary, calls it making the James Bond entry, right? One of the mistakes that we make is we have this build up to this climactic end, and we'll show the configuration and the steps that are required to put all the pieces in place. And then it takes us 15 or 20 minutes to get to that money shot. And then at the end we say, ta-da, but here's the problem. We might lose people along the way, bore them along the way, confuse them along the way. Remember, we're fighting for time. We're fighting for attention, right? We want to come right out of the gate with that most compelling, most impressive part or capability of the solution. I refer to it as the magic trick. Think magic trick. Think like a magician. Whenever I speak in person and whenever I do a workshop, I actually do a magic trick in my sessions. I'm guessing there's probably a few people on the session today that have seen me do one of my magic tricks. But when I do so, I open by saying, I'd like to just do a demonstration for you guys. I'd like to show you a demonstration of mine. And then I do a magic trick. And with the exception of one time, the magic trick has invariably gone very, very well. And at the end, people are asking me, they all ask the same thing. Okay, how did you do it? And I tell them. I tell them exactly what I did. And invariably, two things happen. The first thing, they think to themselves, okay, that's not too hard. I could do that. And the second thing is, honestly, they're a little less impressed. Here's the key question that I ask. How much less impressed would you have been with the trick if you knew what the secret was before I told you? And the answer is unanimous, a resounding 100% less impressed. What's the point? Show the magic secret sauce after the fact. Show the wow factor up front, get their excitement, get them engaged, and once they become curious and once they want to know how is it that you did that, then you tell them the rest of the story. You give them the magic trick or the secret behind the magic trick. So let's return to our journey. So step one or must-have moment number one was consensus. The second is climactic moments. And by the way, one of the things I'm asked on a regular basis, how many sort of climactic moments should I have in any given demo? My opinion, 3 to 5. You should, whenever you're going into a demonstration, you should, another word or term that I use is aha moments. You should know your aha moments. You should have 3 to 5 aha moments. By the way, if you're going into a demo and you don't have aha moments, maybe we're not ready to do a demonstration. We don't know enough about them, right? If we have 10 to 12, it's too much. People can't digest so much in one session. So, and today's session is a perfect example. If the headline was the 15 moments you have to have in a demo, you might not tune in. It's too much to absorb, right? I'm giving you 4 things. I think your demo should be very similar. All right, let's go to the third challenge. And the third challenge takes us to the third must-have moment. The third challenge is we need to quiet the voices. What do we mean? What do I mean by quiet the voices? Well, what are some of the voices that your audience might hear in their head? What are the security controls? What is the architecture? How hard is it to implement? How much is this going to cost us? Does it work on a mobile device? How did you do that? How easy is it to configure? How does this change my day-to-day job? My day-to-day job? If we've done our demo, if we've opened up our demo right, and we've delivered that climactic moment, and we've captured their attention, and we've captured their interest, if we've done our job right, we're now challenging the status quo. We're now making them a little bit uncomfortable because, wow, we need to take this solution seriously. And now they're going to start asking some really hard questions, right? This is a good thing. We've sort of penetrated into a deeper level. What we need to be able to do, and this is must-have moment number 3, we need to reach a point of contentment. We need everyone in the room to feel satisfied, to feel a sense of contentment that their concerns, their issues are going to be addressed and will be addressed. So how do we do that? I believe there's 4 stops on the road to contentment, 4 small stops on the road to contentment that we will or very likely may encounter. Let's again establish a definition for contentment, a state of happiness and satisfaction. That's what I'm striving for when I'm in a demonstration. I want the group to reach a state of happiness and satisfaction, okay? Now, what are the stops along the way? I've used this word a couple times already. Curiosity. Again, I love definitions. A strong desire to know or learn something. If we've done our job right, people are going to be curious. How did you guys do that? I haven't seen that before. What makes your solution so special? And I want to address all that curiosity, and I'm gonna play on that a little bit because that's a very powerful emotion, and that's a very powerful emotion in a sales conversation. The second stop we may encounter is concern, and again, by definition, a matter of interest or importance. When people start showing concern, this is a good thing, folks. I've seen a lot of sales engineers seem to react negatively when they sense that people have concerns about a solution. Actually, it's actually a very good thing. It indicates to me that they're taking this very, very seriously, and they're addressing or they're opening up about the things that matter to them. We want to make sure that we address all the concerns and address them effectively and completely. One of the stops along the journey to contentment might be confusion. This is a bad one. This is one that we want to be very aware of, right? Again, the definition, lack of understanding or uncertainty. So it may not just be that they don't understand, but they're just not certain about it, right? We want to tease out confusion as much as possible, and we want to address it. Now, I talk a lot about in some of my programs, I talk a lot about how do we avoid confusion, right? We want to explain things, but we want to avoid over-explaining things. We want to use common terminology and not assume that they understand our terminology. Sometimes it's just as simple as slowing down and pausing between your key moments. If there's anything I've learned in this role, folks, a confused mind always says no. Be sure not to confuse your audience along the way. Remember, this is a journey. And then the final step, the final small stop, if you will, on the journey to contentment is comfort. Easing of a person's feelings of distress. I like to use the term the warm blanket. sometimes when we go in to give a demonstration, we're dealing with people that, and particularly it might be the users, that are dealing with some very difficult challenges, right? Their current state may be very, very frustrating. They're wasting time. It takes too much energy. It's too much manual work. They're losing money. And they're looking for a solution. They're looking for someone to come in and give them that, wrap them in that warm blanket and say, we got you. We've seen this before. We know how to handle this, right? We've worked with these kind of situations, and we're going to get you there, right? So curiosity, concern, confusion, and then comfort. These are the stops along the road to contentment. So, I already summarized them. So we'll go back to our journey. So getting to the must-have moment number 3, which is contentment, that feeling of satisfaction and happiness and satisfaction in the room, curiosity, concern, confusion, and comfort gets us to contentment. That brings us to the 4th challenge. The 4th challenge is when we get to this point in our demo, right? We started with concurrence and got everybody on the same page. We had that climactic moment and got them engaged. We addressed their concerns. We diffused any confusion, right? We satisfied their curiosity. We gave them that warm blanket, that feeling of comfort, right? We've got contentment in the room now. The last challenge we face, ambiguity. What next? Where are we? And where do we go next? The problem we have is finishing a demo where everybody feels good, but we haven't defined the next steps. Are there any other requirements that we need to address? Are there any requirements that we haven't addressed? Are there other stakeholders that need to be involved? We need to remove the ambiguity and find out what the next steps are. It's not good enough, and this is, I feel very strongly about this. It's not good enough to give a good demonstration and get to that point where everybody in the room feels good, but we haven't defined the next step. But let me acknowledge this important point. This is a balancing act, folks. I understand that. We don't want to be pushy, and we don't want to push too hard, and we don't want to sort of, sour a good meeting by sort of turning it, by applying by applying too much pressure. But at the same token, we need to define what's next. At the end of the day, we need to get some level of commitment. Now that we've gone down this journey, right? We've brought everybody along for this journey. We need to get some level of commitment. What's next? There's different levels of commitment, right? We're not necessarily asking you to sign on the dotted line. We're not necessarily asking you to open up the checkbook. We just want to define a next step. And again, let's define what we're talking about here. Commitment is a state of being dedicated to a cause or an activity. That's really all we're looking for. Can we just commit to at least a next step activity? What might that be? Well, it might be another demonstration or a workshop or a proof of concept. Maybe there are some other requirements that we have to address that weren't in scope for this conversation. Maybe there are some other stakeholders that we need to address. Great. Now, if we've gotten to the technical win, maybe we're ready to talk to contracting. Super. I know all the AEs in the session would love to hear this. Maybe we're ready to move to procurement. Maybe they're so convinced and so sold that they're ready to talk pricing. Whatever the case, we need to get some level of agreement as to what's the next step. Where are we going next? Without that, folks, it's not a successful demo, a successful sales conversation. And Miles, just so you know, I'm on my last slide here. So we're running, about 30 minutes. So I think we're even a few minutes ahead of time.
Excellent. Love it.
So let's revisit the journey, folks. We started out with a plan and an agenda. And as you know, as I'm sure my hosts, our hosts, oh, and we got to commitment. As I'm sure, oh, and I'm messing up my last slide here. So the 4 must-have moments in every successful sales demonstration. First and foremost, consensus, as I'm sure our hosts are delighted to hear me say. The second is those climactic moments. The third is contentment. And there's 4 small stops that we very likely will have to make along the road to contentment. Building curiosity, addressing concerns, dissolving confusion, and providing that sense of comfort, that warm blanket. And then and only then can we reasonably expect to get to commitment. But we need to remember not to leave the room, so to speak, or not to close the meeting until, in fact, we do get to that commitment. So with that, folks, I thank you very much. Again, my name's Chris White with DEMODoctor.com, and I'm happy to field any questions that might have come in.
Thank you so much, Chris. Yeah, we've got some great questions that have come in. I guess the first one here, what should we do if we can't get any commitment in the room or from the audience?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I hear this a lot, and this is common because a lot of times, let's be honest, after a demo, there's 3 outcomes, right? Or there's 3 kind of conditions. Either they loved what they saw and they're ready to commit right now, they're ready to sign up right now, not likely. They hated what they saw and it's absolutely not a solution for them. And more than likely, they're not going to tell you that, even if that's really what they're thinking. So more than likely, it's going to be sort of a, we're not sure, we need to think about it, we don't know. If you can't get them to commit to a next step, at the very least, get them to commit to a date when they will get back to you with an answer on what the next step is. That's the lowest level of commitment, right? Is, well, in that case, when can I, or when should we expect to hear, you know, at least, you know, what you think the next step might be, right? So to get something, get some level of commitment. And by the way, Miles, the individual asked, when I'm doing a sales presentation or demo, I'll literally pull up the calendar right then and say, if you guys need a couple weeks, I mean, if you need a couple weeks, why don't we just pop open the calendar now? Can we just put a placeholder for 30 minutes? I mean, I'm sure you're you know, if you guys are anything like me, I mean, calendars fill up really quickly. So I think it's in everyone's best interest if we just put a placeholder and you know, that way we at least have, you know, something in the books. So hopefully that addresses the question, Miles.
Absolutely. Okay, next one here is from Mike. He asks, how often do you check the points of contentment during a demo?
Good question, Mike. Thanks for asking. You know, I think it's a sense. And let me explain what I mean by that. First of all, whenever I'm giving a demo, and I know my aha moments, right? I said I typically have 3 to 5 aha moments. I think of a demo as, I mentioned, I think of a demo as a journey. I literally think of it as a train ride. And each aha moment is a station. And so when I get to that aha moment, all the people get off the train and they look around, right? Before I go to my next aha moment, I want to make sure all the passengers are back on board, right? That's when I'm checking for contentment. And I'm doing so by seeking feedback, right? And making sure that people understand what they've seen. And I get some sense of whether or not that solution or that capability is going to meet that requirement, right? Before I move to the next one. So I'm bringing the audience along for the ride as I go. Now, does that mean I don't go to my next sort of segment in the demo if I don't feel a strong sense of contentment? Of course not. I may very well get a response like, well, we're not sure yet. We need to see more. Okay, great, right? It takes time for people to, you know, develop an opinion, right? It takes time for people to make up their mind or see what they need to see. But anyways, Mike, I hope that answers your question. I try to sort of take the temperature of the room and bring people along for the ride each step of the way. Hopefully that addresses the question, Miles.
Thanks for that question, Mike. We have a question here from Cameron. Is there any way to recover mid-demo if you feel your climactic moments aren't quite hitting, but you still have time in the demo left?
Yeah, that's a good one, Cameron. Thanks for that. I'm gonna say a resounding yes, and I'm gonna say I have a couple thoughts on this one. First of all, it goes back to the partnership with your AE, and this is something that you guys need to talk about. And the conversation goes like this. You know, if we're ever in a demo and the message doesn't seem to be resonating with the group, how do you want to handle that? And how should we handle that? Because, and Cameron, I'll tell you this, I've done this a handful of times in my career. I've been in that spot where I'm giving a demonstration and it just doesn't seem to be resonating in the least, right? I'm getting these blank stares, and I'll literally look at the person, either the person in charge, right? The person, our champion, or the person that brought us in, and say, and this is, by the way, this is after asking, does this make sense, folks? Are there any questions? Do you see how you might use this and, you know, to address some of the things we're talking about? And I'm sort of getting nothing in response. It's at that point where I'll either look at my sales counterpart, or I'll even look at our champ, you know, the individual who brought us in, and I've done this a number of times, and say, I'll make up a name, Bob, it's hard for me to tell whether or not this is resonating with the group. Is this in line with what you were expecting? And are you not seeing what it was that you thought you'd see? We need to put it on these people. You know, like, look, folks, we're not there for our health, right? We're there to show them a solution that we believe is a good fit for their agenda and for their objectives and their problems. And if they're not seeing anything that resonates with them or looks like a good solution to them, let's just put it on the table. So that's my answer, Cameron. If you get sort of halfway in and you've hit a couple of key points and you're still not sort of activating that RAS, put it on the table. You know, and if it's really not a good fit, let's just close the laptop and go home.
Excellent. Thank you, Cameron, for the question. Next one is from Chester. Do you believe one should challenge the prospect's vision or just try to fit the demo to their needs uncovered in discovery?
Yeah, that's a good question, Chester. Thank you for asking. So I'm probably not telling anybody that they don't know, or I'm not telling anybody new by mentioning the challenger sale, or the concept of the challenger sale. I do believe in the concept of the challenger sale. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with challenging your prospects on some level, but I would say be careful when and where you do it. Number one, you have to have the right relationship. You have to build the relationship. And one of my favorite words is receptivity. You have to sense the receptivity of the individual that you're dealing with, and you have to be the expert. But my opinion is one of the most powerful sales conversations, or one of the most powerful sales messages, is when you can deliver a disruptive truth. So when you can shed a gap in their thinking, or when you can shed a gap in their plan, or a gap in their initiative, or what have you, as the expert, that's incredibly powerful. And if they sense that, okay, wait a minute, this individual actually knows something that I don't, or they have a solution, they see a solution that I haven't considered or seen, maybe I need to pay more attention. So again, I hope that answers Chester's question. Be careful there, but it is a very powerful thing when you can challenge in a very appropriate way. And by the way, let me emphasize one final point. It has to be in the customer's best interest. And it's okay if it's in your best interest too. That's okay. I mean, that's our job, but it really and truly has to be in their best interest, right? And it has to sound something like, you've made it very clear that your goal is X. My concern on your behalf is that you're overlooking this piece, and as a result, you're not going to be as successful as you are thinking you might be. To me, that's very powerful. So hopefully that answers the question, Mom.
Good stuff there. I have another one coming here. Who should be doing that resonating check? Is that pre-sales, sales? Who does that responsibility lie with?
Yeah, well, again, whoever asked me, great question. And I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back to one of the first slides in the deck, which is this: sales is a team sport, and a demo is a team event. And I think it has to be both. For sure, let me just say to those of you who are the pre-sales technicians or the sales engineers, first and foremost, it's absolutely your role as you're going through your demo to make sure that people are following along the way. Okay. That being said, I expect my sales counterpart to be my wing person, right? To have my back. They may see something that I don't see, or they may sense something that I don't sense. The best sales folks that I've ever worked with, they know when to interject and say, Chris, let me interrupt for just a moment. You just made an important point. I'm not sure it landed on everyone. And then even level it up, if necessary. The reason what Chris just said is important is, right? Do you see how that addresses what we talked about, right? In fact, they may have even had some conversations that I'm not privy to. So I think it's a team effort. You guys, anybody who's ever heard me talk knows that I'm all about analogies. I'm going to give you another analogy, okay? If a pitcher takes the mound and throws a no-hitter, he or she gets all the credit, or at least most of the credit, and rightfully so. They stood up and they threw the pitches. But guess what? That no-hitter doesn't happen if the catcher isn't calling the right pitches and making all the right plays, if the coaches aren't constantly in communication with the players on the field, right? If the outfielders aren't making plays and the infielders aren't making plays, around the bases. What's the point? The point is that a no-hitter, just, or a demo rather, just like a no-hitter, that's a team event and that's a team success. So I think everyone on the team, everyone engaged has to take a part of that role. So hopefully that answers the question, Miles.
Absolutely, and I love the baseball reference there.
Great.
We have another question here. How important is following up with clients impacting the commitment? We have people who go cold after a demo. We have to proactively follow up. Why do you think that happens?
Yeah, I'm glad that the individual who asked, I'm glad they asked, and that it triggers a number of thoughts. First of all, I hate to say what I'm about to say, but it's a fact that we all have to face. It's a fact that I've had to face numerous times in my life, in my career rather. If a prospect goes cold after a demo, that's the best indication that for whatever reason the demo didn't go very well. And I hate saying that, but that's the cold hard truth. And I've had to swallow that pill on more than one occasion. It doesn't always mean it's a bad demo, but it just means that it wasn't enough to push them over the edge, right? So that's one thing. That being said, sometimes they go cold just because they're too busy, right? Our number one job is to sell software. Their number one job is not to buy software necessarily, right? So we need to make sure, we do need to pursue them, right? And by the way, the sales engineers need to, this is very much an account executive role, but it's also very much our role as the technical sales person, right? To pursue that customer and that engagement as well. In fact, I mentioned the 6 habits. I've told a few folks, it occurs to me that I left out a habit, right? My habits are partner, pro, prepare, practice, perform, and perfect. I left out habit number 7, which is to pursue. We need to actively engage. Sometimes if they go cold, it's just because they've got too many other competing, items and agenda. And if we don't pursue them and put it back on their radar, it might go quiet. Now, if we pursue, if we pursue and they go and they stay cold, again, that indicates that it's either no longer a priority or for whatever reason, it just fell flat. So again, Miles, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I guess actually to build off of that, so do you have to have each of the moments, or is it required to hit all of these moments for it to be a successful demo in your eyes?
Yeah, no, and that's look, again, if anybody's ever heard me talk, I mean, there are, you know, shades of gray in all the things we talk about. And I just think I think that's true of sales. And I think that's true of, you know, at the end of the day, people buy from people, and there are shades of gray in personal relationships, period. You know, do you have to have like your little, your four, you know, 4-item checklist, and as you're going through the demo, go, yep, got that. No, not necessarily. And can you have arguably an effective demo, you know, without all these? Yes, I would say certainly you can. That being said, the best demos, the most successful demos, like for me to walk away and go, that was really a good demo, is those 4 things. And I will say this, Miles, I'm really glad whoever asked that question. I'm going to say that concurrence, you've got to get concurrence. Like I really struggle start launching into a demo if I don't have general agreement in the room as to why we're here and what we're going to talk about. Number 1. Number 2, like I said, you got to have something exciting, right? Some climactic moment, something interesting that's going to catch people's attention, right? Number 3, if you don't have some level of contentment along the way, you know, whether it's curiosity or some concerns or some level of comfort, right? Chances are it's not been great. And like I said, I personally, you know, think commitment. So I don't know. I think I sort of waffled a little bit, but I just think those are the elements of the most successful demo. It doesn't mean it was a bad demo if you don't have all 4.
Well, looks like we're about out of time here. So I just want to say another thank you to Chris. An awesome session. I actually sent a couple of my clients your way to view this later on because I think it was so great. So if everyone in chat, a little clap for Chris, that'd be great. Let me see here. So if you want to view this presentation later on, please join that LinkedIn group. The link to join that is in the chat. Chris, if anyone has any questions for you later on, is there a way to contact you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, of course, I'm on LinkedIn, so anybody can reach me on LinkedIn. The website is demodoctor.com, www.demodoctor.com. You have to type in the www because sometimes it doesn't work on some browsers. And it's chris.white@demodoctor.com, and demodoctor is all spelled out, all one word. So lots of ways to reach me. And of course, I'm happy to have a conversation with you know, love talking about this stuff. So happy to field any questions.
Thank you, Chris. For everyone who is sticking around, this session will end. To join the next 2 sessions, which will be digital whiteboarding for pre-sales, and then why add video and automation to your pre-sales process. To enter those webinars, you'll reference the email that was sent to you. If you don't have that link, you can go to demofest2020.com and you can enter the webinars from there. Thanks again to Chris. Everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Miles. Really enjoyed it.